Welcome, welcome, welcome. We'll allow everyone a few minutes to log in and join us. But welcome, welcome, welcome. If you are here for how to get budget and buy-in for privacy program talent with True Staffing Partners, you are in the right place. And we are so excited to be here with all of you today. And for all of you watching this replay in the months and years to come, thank you for taking the time to watch what we believe is the most mission critical webinar that we will be giving all year long and maybe well into 2024. This is how to get budget and buy-in for privacy program talent. My name is General Coseglia. I am the founder and CEO of True Staffing Partners. We are a 13-year-old staffing agency that specializes in data privacy, cybersecurity, and e-discovery staffing with a strong focus on data privacy and protection as a core discipline. I've personally placed north of 4,000 people into full-time permanent contract and contract to hire positions over the last 13 years. And I am so pleased to be joined here today with our Vice President of Business Development, Rachael Haher. Rachael, say hello to everyone and give everyone some vital information about how to engage with us on today's webinar.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. We'll be waiting until the end of the presentation, but we'll get to as many of your questions as possible.
Well, with no further ado, we're going to jump right in because we have so much information to share with everybody, both statistical and anecdotal. It will probably make your head spin and you'll want to watch this back a few times to gather all the information, which is awesome. So let's kick it right off with today's agenda, which is how to get budget and buy-in for first, full-time employees or direct hires. Second, contract augmentation resources. Third, remote flexibility for your staff. And finally, how to get agency collaboration, AKA, how do you convince your financial stakeholders to give you the budget to use True to help you get the talent that you need today. So let's jump right in. Here's where we're getting a lot of our data today. Very important. The first is here on the left, the 2022 and 2023 True Staffing Partners Data Privacy Jobs Report. Now, this information is taken from what we do as a business and what we see happening in the marketplace when people take new jobs, meaning this is what we call point of hire data. We think that this data gives you the most realistic insight into what is happening right now and what is likely to happen in the future. So this data is based on people actually accepting positions in the last several years. We're also really proud to be sponsors for the 2023 IAPP Privacy Professional Salary Survey. This data is based on surveying people based on what they're making, meaning in 2021 and 2022, what were the trends? What did people make in terms of compensation? What are they making? That is what we like to think of as historical data. And you're going to see there are differences between these two data sets, and we're going to analyze them and give you insight and intelligence into how they correlate with each other throughout the course of this presentation. So,
Jared, let's get started with how to get budget and buy-in and why now.
The timing is so important. And one of the things that we really found pretty shocking is that in the E&Y IAPP Annual Privacy Governance Report, it said that 12% was the size growth of most privacy programs during the years of 2021 and 2022. Why is this such a shocking number? Well, because those 2 years, we saw more privacy staffing than maybe we saw in the 5 years preceding it. But yet, programs only grew by 12%, which is where you get the second statistic here, which is 62% of respondees on that report say that they lack the needed resources, largely talent resources, to execute the objectives of the program. And as a result, they're spreading out functionality across multiple lines of defense 50% of the time, which means they're leveraging people within their own organization in IT, in legal, in human resources to get things done for the privacy program. That means that right now, people desperately need more talent, but they are not getting the budget and buy-in to get the necessary talent. We recently came back from the Concero CPO Forum, a great conference filled with about 150 plus chief privacy officers from all over the world. And we were allowed to ask 3 questions. The first 2 questions we were allowed to ask before we met all the attendees at the actual event was, do you have approval to hire full-time staff? The second question we asked is, are you allowed to hire contractors on staff? And what we found was pretty astonishing. 25% maybe could have full-time approval, but only 15% were actively working on full-time searches, and a whopping 60% of CPOs did not have approval to hire full-time. Conversely, almost 50% of respondees said that they could hire contractors, which is a much larger percentage, nearly double than those that might be able to hire full-time employees. 18% could use contractors for sure, and 32% definitely not. So what we're going to do today is tell you how to get the budget and buy-in, both for full-time headcount approval and or for contract approval. We're also going to give you some predictions into how the market is going to behave over the next several years. So let's look at how the market has behaved over the last 5 or 6 years. If you go back into 2017-18, this was the rise of GDPR, right? We see the data privacy job market essentially shifting modes about every 2 years. It goes through a cycle of hot job market and slow job market. 17 and 18 leading up to May of GDPR's rollout in 18, busiest we've seen the market at that time. Everyone was preparing for GDPR. There were lots of new jobs being invented. Those jobs were all across the globe. And that hot job market bled even into the beginning of 2019, but well past May of 2018. Now, we all know what happened in 2020. And that's when COVID came, and COVID decimated the job market for everybody. And privacy was not immune to this. We saw unemployment rise to nearly 14% across the US. And as a result, the job market cooled. Then the rebound happened so quickly. 21 and 22, the busiest hiring in privacy, well outpaced what happened in 17 and 18. And what's happening during these hot and slow markets? Well, in a hot job market, the cost of talent inflates. Why? Because there's extreme competition for talent. There are more jobs opening. Job seekers have more options. Job seekers are considering more opportunities. People are under more intense scrutiny based on regulatory environments in order to hire privacy talent. And so you're seeing contractor availability decrease because there's so much full-time availability. And as a result, when the market slows, the cost of talent stabilizes. There's less competition for talent because there's less open jobs available, and contractor availability becomes very high because unemployment is up, people are getting laid off, and people are not able to get full-time jobs because there aren't as many out there to be had. And that's where we are right now. Everybody thought we were going into a recession. When Zuckerberg laid off 10,000 people at Meta in October of 2022, Q4, we saw a complete collapse of the stock market. We saw everyone looking to lay off employees, lots of privacy engineers, lots of legal privacy professionals, and lots of human resource recruiters, which we're going to talk about later on in today's presentation, all lost jobs. Now, we're about a year into a would-be recession, and it looks like things are going to rebound, and things are slowly starting to tick back up in terms of hiring and headcount approval as we move into 2024. But we believe that in 2025 and 2026, we're going to hit the hot job market again. As is the case with every 2-year cycle in the privacy job market, things are going to get really hot. So if you're looking to avoid cost of talent inflation, extreme competition, and leverage contractors while they're still available, the next 12 months are going to be critical times to move on privacy talent.
So Jared, what is True's guidance for getting budget and buy-in right now?
Sure. So the first is avoid competition and salary inflation in 2025 by hiring now in 2024. And we're going to show you just how much more you might have to pay in 2025 versus right now for privacy talent. Second, take full advantage of contractors now. There are lots of them available. The supply meets the demand, and there are really talented people who are very much open to contract available for augmentation. And finally, budget for long-term retention, not just for what it takes to hire somebody today, but what it will take to keep them as we move into 25 and 26.
Jared, let's talk about how to get budget and buy-in specifically for FTE or direct hires.
Let's do it. And we're going to talk not only about how to get the budget and buy-in, but make sure you get enough budget to actually acquire the people that you need. So a few statistics as to what's happened in the last 12 months. The last 100 days have seen more full-time hiring than the entire first half of 2023. So things are picking back up. Second, 87% of open headcount is for mid-market professionals. This is a big change. There is not a lot of job at the top. There is not a lot of job at the bottom, meaning if you're entry level or a seasoned executive at a director or CPO level, there are less jobs for you in the marketplace right now, and everyone is really vying for that 3 to 8 years of experience. 75% of job seekers right now are accepting the first offer they are extended, which is a huge shift from what we saw in the peak of 2022, where only 45% of people were taking the first offer that was extended to them, which is going to speak to speed of hire, which we'll get into later. 0% of job seekers represented by True in the last 140 days have received a counter offer from their current employer. And I don't know if anybody saw the article that came out today in the Wall Street Journal, but it's all about how companies wish people would quit. And we've gone literally from 2002, which we call the Great Resignation, and we estimate about 2/3 of the privacy job market switched jobs, to now employers wishing people would switch jobs in order to create room to hire more people, in order to create room to promote people from within. But there's a real problem with a lack of attrition in the industry across all industries right now. This is tied into the fifth metric, which is 20% of jobs filled by True required a base compensation above the initial range given to us by our customers. This is in tremendous contrast to 2022, where 68% of jobs we received wound up having to pay more than they anticipated to acquire the individual they wanted for the job than expected. So right now, likelihood is you're going to be able to find someone in your salary range. There's less competition, there's less salary inflation, and that won't last forever.
So what you're saying is the key is to hire now to save money and get better caliber of talent.
Correct. And not have to compete, because a lot of people in 2022 didn't get their first choice of hire. They didn't get their second choice of hire. Some of them didn't even get their third choice of hire. And right now, most people are getting their first choice because people are accepting the first offer given to them. So let's benchmark what it actually will cost you to acquire talent, not just what people are making, but what it will cost to acquire them. And we've broken this down into industry benchmarks, geographic benchmarks, and competition. So let's start with industry benchmarks. If you looked at LinkedIn Insights in the month of November, just based on what jobs are being posted online, and we'll talk about how effective that is later in today's presentation, 38% is still in big tech. Despite all the layoffs happening, there's still a tremendous amount of jobs. Almost more than 1/3 of the jobs are still in big tech, followed very closely by financial, banking, brokerage, fintech, healthcare, and government. Why? Because these are the most regulated verticals. It makes sense that they would have the most job demand. But look at everything else. What's really amazing about this is it just shows you that privacy jobs have truly proliferated nearly every industry vertical, and there's a demand and need for them everywhere. So let's take these same industry verticals, break them down now into separate categories in terms of compensation. We've broken it down by Fortune 500 big tech, healthcare tech, biotech, pharma, and finally telecom, retail, entertainment, and financial. We tend to see salaries fall into similar buckets in these three categories. And you can see there are some wide ranges here. And keep in mind, this is not what people are making. This is what people make at the point of hire based on industry, meaning when they change jobs in the last 12 months. And this is about the same as what it's been. It's gone up a little bit, but it's about the same as what it was 6-12 months ago. It is starting to uptick significantly now in the back half of the year as hiring turns on more aggressively. You'll find in the left-hand side here is base comp, in parentheticals is total comp, and you can see that there is a big difference in total compensation, particularly at the high end of the marketplace. All of this data is available for your consumption after the webinar. Let's go on to Europe versus North America. This is from the IAPP salary survey, which we're a proud sponsor of this year. And what it essentially tells us is that if you're in Europe, you're making about 55% less than an American counterpart who has a similar or same position as you do. Let's break that down even further. If you break it down by North America and Europe based on job responsibility, you'll see the top three here we've highlighted in red that have the biggest discrepancies in base salary. And the percentage differences are nearly across the board 40 to 60% different between North America and Europe, and North America being primarily US, certainly not Mexico or Latin America, and Europe being mainland Europe, including the UK. Why are these so different? Well, the primary reason is because GDPR commoditized compensation in Europe in a way that it hasn't in the US. The cultural differences between the US and Europe also justify different salaries. Privacy is a consumer right in the US, it is an individual right in Europe, and as a result, we are wielding privacy professionals, specifically technical professionals and leadership, to achieve more of a measure of business risk and business opportunity and not pure compliance jobs. For example, we don't get many searches for DPOs in the United States because the focus isn't on meeting the baseline standard of GDPR here in the US, although they do meet it. It's about what else can we do? We also in the US have a very fractured regulatory environment. That fractured environment without a federal legislation and 50 different states having 50 different laws, more or less, also creates complexity. That complexity increases compensation, and that's why you're seeing such a discrepancy here. We'll get into why this is important in a second. When we compare the true data against the IAPP data, we see that the mean salaries when you combine US and EU compensation, according to the IAPP, are here in the green on the far right, and our three kind of segmentations here on the left. You'll see that top line privacy analyst. The mean salary there for IAPP is about 90K. You'll also notice that the bottom of what True predicts those ranges are is about 90K, which makes sense, which tells us this data is really accurate, meaning people aren't going to leave a job for less money, generally speaking. They certainly did in 21 and 22, unless they get a raise. And this is what it's taking to get people to leave a job and start a new one. You'll see the same at Privacy Counsel at around 175, very similar base comp as a floor for what it will take to get someone to leave.
Jared, other than the privacy analysts and maybe the project managers, the numbers are really different as you move up in seniority. Why is that?
Well, because here we've put a mean between the US and the EU. And as we just said, the EU counterparts make 55% less, generally speaking, than their US counterparts. And so that's why these ranges are so much higher, because there's significantly more hiring for program managers, consultants, privacy directors, and engineers in the United States than in Europe, which is why the salaries are inflated significantly higher than what the IAPP says the mean is. So we really believe these ranges are accurate reflections of what it will take to get someone to move a job. And it's important when you budget that you're budgeting not for what people say they're making, but for what it will take to get them to move. This is my favorite slide maybe in the whole deck, and it's a little complicated, so I'm going to explain it. Percentage of salary increase based on years of experience at the point of hire. So this chart on the right is from 2022. And what it essentially tells us is if you didn't have any experience in the industry, 0 years, you actually took a pay cut to break in. But after a year, you recoup that because now you have leverage of about a 10% increase with a year of experience. If you had 3 to 4 years of experience, you were getting on average approximately 30% increases in base comp, meaning you're making $100,000, you make a move in 2022 at the peak of the job frenzy, and now you're making 130. If you're 4 to 6 years experience, you start at 100, now you're at 140. At 6 to 8 years, 100, now you're at 120 on average. 18% and 12% for 8 to 10 plus years of experience is really speaking more to the executives at the privacy director or CPO or general counsel level. They're not getting as wild increases at the point of hire. Why? Because the demand for them is not nearly as high as the demand for that 3 to 8 year window, which is where most of the hiring occurs. So you could see here that anywhere between 20 to 40% increases in 2022 if you had 3 to 8 years of experience. But that's gone down in 2023. In the last 12 months, that has gotten down to about a 12 to 24% increase at the point of hire. And that's what we're seeing in terms of the trend right now. So if we break it down year over year and look at 2021, 98% of the placements that we made received an increase in comp. 23% increase to be very specific. In 2022, 99% of people received an increase in comp, with an average of a 35% increase in base compensation. Now, if we flash forward to 2023, only 65% of people are actually getting an increase in comp. We've seen a lot of people make lateral moves. We've seen a lot of people who are unemployed be willing to take a slight step back in order to become gainfully employed. There's a lot less options for them. Salaries are being held a little more firm. People are, only 20% are going above their range versus 68% in 2022. And so the average increase has dipped nearly in half to 18%, 18% being that middle of 12 to 24% increases in base compensation at the point of hire. So we've certainly gone from a very hot job market to a very stable job market in 2023.
Jared, what do you think is going to happen in 2024?
Well, I think we're seeing things turn on a little bit more, but probably not like a light switch. That light switch effect is likely to occur in Q4 of 2024 or Q1 of 2025, when I think we're going to see the kind of frenzy we saw in 2021 and 2022. A levy is being built. People only are growing by 12%. 62% of people say they don't have enough resources for their program. It's only a matter of time until that levy breaks and hiring comes back on full throttle. The NASDAQ and the Dow have had the best 8 days in the last 8 days that they have had since July of 2021, which means as stock prices go up and companies have more money to spend, they're going to reinvest in their talent infrastructure, but carefully over the next year.
So what is True's guidance for FTE and direct hire resources?
So if you're looking to hire FTEs and you need the budget and buy-in approval, budget for compensation to get people to make a move, not based on what they're currently making, but what it takes to get them to change jobs. Second, consider hiring in the EU, Latin America, or APAC if lower cost of talent is your highest priority. Third, approach executive and mid-market search differently in terms of salary increases. That 3 to 8 year window is going to command a higher increase percentage at the point of hire than an executive, and certainly more than an entry-level professional, many of whom are willing to take pay cuts to find their way into the privacy vertical. And finally, hire FTEs in 2024, while job seekers are only getting 12 to 24% increases in comp at the point of hire versus 20 to 40% increases in point of hire, which is what we expect to happen in 2025.
All right, Jared, let's switch over to talking about how to get budget and buy-in for contractors.
Absolutely. It's amazing how much contracting is happening in the privacy community. Never before have we seen so much as we have this year, maybe in 2020, but this year I think we'll exceed it. 55% of jobs filled this year will likely be contract positions in data privacy. That is the majority. Second, 20% of contract jobs are part-time fractional, meaning they're not necessarily working 40 hours a week and they're not necessarily working 52 weeks a year. These are fractional resources people can lean into for niche expertise. Third, 45% of contractors are perpetual or intend to convert to full-time employees. And this may be your best strategy to getting full-time headcount, is to start with a contract to hire. Less than 2% of our contractors who we placed this calendar year were asked to convert into full-time employees in January or May. However, in the last 120 days, 27% of them have been asked and accepted conversions into full-time employees. And what does that say to us? That says to us that people used contract to hire as the way to get the approval for a full-time headcount, meaning it wasn't justification just for the job. It was now justification for the job and the person that was in it as a contractor. We didn't just want to fill that privacy engineer job. We wanted to fill it with Jenny, who's been with us for 9 months. And so that is a remarkable shift in people being approved to get turned into full-time employees in the back half of this year.
Jared, is that typical every year? Do companies tend to convert contractors at the end of the year?
It's a great question. And you would think so, right? You would think so. They've been with us a while. We hired in the beginning of the year. Now's the time to make those decisions. But actually, trending tells us that people tend to let people go at the end of the year because they either A, have less work as they near the holidays, or have finished the projects that they hired the contractors for, who are more part-time fractional or part-time impact, or they're hiring new contractors for coverage for the holidays, for projects that are coming up in the new year. It is rare we see such a large percent. I mean, this is more than 1 in 4 of our contractors getting the opportunity to convert at the end of the year, which is signaling to us the strategy of contract to hire has been working, is a good one for our customers, and is good for the industry.
Okay, let's have some fun and talk about the myths and facts of using contractors. Contractors are out-of-work job seekers.
Oh, that's a myth. We have so many people, about half of our contractors are actually leaving full-time jobs to explore more opportunities. And this is for a variety of reasons, which we'll unpack later, including the motivations of job seekers, the first of which is working more remotely from home.
Contractors make less money than full-time employees.
Ugh, such a myth. Most of our contractors are making the same amount of base compensation in the 8 months they're on contract, 8 or 9 months on contract, than they would working in 12 months. So this is definitely a myth.
To hire a contractor, they're going to require 40 hours a week.
Definitely not. As you saw, 20% are fractional part-time contractors, and we're going to get into all those different modalities in a second. So this is definitely a myth.
A contractor will just leave as soon as they get a full-time job.
Oh, so many people think this, but guess what? Myth. Contractors love contracting. Many of them are lifestyle contractors who may not want to convert, and others are much more focused on the impact opportunity than they are on job stability right now.
Contractors don't receive benefits.
Well, if you're contracting through True Staffing Partners, you do receive benefits. You become eligible for our benefits just like a full-time employee at our company, and we offer a up to 4% 401k match, which vests 100% after your first year of employment with True Staffing Partners, which has been a tremendous way for us to retain contractors until they're ready to convert or until their project ends, and then we put them on another project. And yeah, you can get a 401k match and have it in your pocket. That's your money to keep after a year. Most corporations in America make you wait anywhere between 3 and 6 years before you're fully vested on that first year of employment.
So Jared, break down for us the different ways people can use contractors.
Absolutely. So everybody thinks of staffing as full-time or contract, but it's actually a little more complicated than that. You've got contract to hire, you've got fractional part-time, and you've got full-time employees. In that fractional to part-time category, we have 2 different kinds of fractional talent. One is what we call PTP, which is part-time perpetual, which means I need somebody who I can just go to for DPA overflow, or I need somebody every quarter we can reach out to do a privacy impact assessment. They're only coming in and doing maybe 40 hours a quarter or 5 hours a week 1 week, 40 hours a week another, but they stay with us perpetually. So they learn institutional knowledge and we can lean on them and get almost 100% utilization out of them when we wouldn't if they were a full-time employee, or they'd have to wear lots of different hats or learn lots of different skills as an FTE. The second is part-time impact, which is more for short projects. So we're rolling out a new product. We need to bake privacy by design into the technology. We have a deliverable date of X, and the next 3 months, we're going to run to get that product released. And we need a privacy engineer to come in and help us. That's what we would call part-time impact. They come in, they're working 40 plus hours a week or 35 plus hours a week. The project gets its deliverable out and they phase out of the organization. Now let's look at the top 10 reasons why people use contractors. The first is they don't have full-time headcount approval. And I think when we showed you that statistic of 25 versus 50% might be able to use contractors, this is why. They just can't get the approval, and they might be able to get the approval for a contractor. The second is circumventing in-office policy, and we'll talk about the statistics on remote versus return to office policies and how it's affected the job market in a bit. But this is a true case, is very often full-time employees are held to a totally different standard than contractors. And contractors often don't have to come into the office the same way that full-time employees are being mandated. And so how do you get around that in-office policy if the person you want's in a different location or in the right location but won't come into an office? You bring them in on contract. 3, geographic talent shortage. If you're looking for somebody in Des Moines, Iowa, who's a privacy expert, it is a finite corpus of available talent. You may need to look at a contractor in another geography to bridge the gap while you're looking for that full-time hire or trying to convince someone to move to Des Moines. 4, check the fit before you commit. This is our fun way of saying contract to hire. We want to make sure that this person is the right person for us And it is very difficult for us as an organization to fire somebody once they're a full-time employee. And that process of terminating an employee that's not performing well could take months, quarters, or even a year or more. You bring them in as a contractor, it doesn't work out, which is rare in our case. We have a 92% success rate of contractors still on assignment, finishing their assignment, or converting into full-time employees. So check the fit before you commit. 5, plug and play for high impact projects. Short timeline, won't need that talent all year, certainly won't need them beyond that year. Come in, bring in a contractor, phase them out. 6, coverage for long-term leave. We got the holidays coming up, Thanksgiving, Christmas, people are going to be away on vacation. FMLA, the most hired range of candidates in privacy is 3 to 8 years. And so a lot of people with 3 to 8 years experience are having babies. They're going out on paternity and maternity leave. We need somebody to cover for the next 3 to 6 to 12 months. This is a great way to do it with a contractor. 7, FTE hiring timeline too long. As you'll see later, there's a lot of what we call DIY staffing going on right now in corporate America, and the resistance to using external recruiters, usually for cost, but we'll dispel that myth later today as well. And if your hiring timeline is taking you way too long, bring in a contractor to bridge the gap. Defense against FTE attrition and burnout. If your employees are doing too much, working too many hours, complaining, and you're afraid you're going to lose the people you have because you can't onboard a full-time hire, bring in a contractor to prevent burnout. This goes hand in hand with number 9, which is up-leveling existing staff. We see a lot of people say, I need my staff to understand how to use the data mapping module in OneTrust, but none of us have ever touched it. And we just bought OneTrust and we're implementing it, but we have no idea really how to use it. And we're 8 weeks in line for service from the software provider. Well, you bring in a contractor, they can help up-level your staff, create those workflows, and then phase out, which gives your staff some professional development as well as some relief. And finally, a culture of contractors. Talk to your IT directors, talk to your CISO, talk to other stakeholders in other lines of business, your legal ops director, and find out, are they allowed to use contractors with more ease of approval? And if that's the culture of your company, which we found a lot of our organizations, it absolutely is, because keep in mind, contractors hit your P&L report as a business in a different way than a full-time employee will in terms of projected costs and liability in terms of costs. This is a great way to sell contractors to your financial stakeholders. These are the top 10 reasons our customers come to us. Now we're going to breeze through this next section very quickly. Here are a bunch of use cases. It could be legal, meaning, hey, we're moving into a new regulatory environment. We're opening up business in Latin America, and I need somebody that understands the regulatory world there, but I don't need them forever. I need them to come in, help us adjust, and scale out. We got so many DPAs, my head is spinning. DPA overflow, please help me with all my agreements. This is a great use case for bringing in a contractor for legal. Enterprise technology. Let's say you've implemented tech, as I just gave an example of OneTrust or Big ID or Wirewheel, and you need somebody who's an expert in that space, but you may not need them forever. Or say you're exploring privacy enhanced technology and you don't have an expert on staff, bring in a contractor. Data management and governance. This is a big one. We see a lot of data discovery for PII, PHI. We see a lot of requests for data mapping, DSAR program development. A lot of this is specialized talent that can be phased in and phased out. PIA, DPIA is another big one we get a lot of requests for. Risk and compliance, or GRC. So probably the most popular here is ROPA, a lot of ROPA overflow. It's just too much for us to handle, but also certification issuance. Let's say your company's trying to get a high trust certification. We need somebody that's helped an organization do what it takes to get ready for that issuance. We have contractors who can help you with that. Product engineering and diligence. So we need to bake privacy by design into our product and then phase it out. We don't do products all day, every day. Or we need software development lifecycle acceleration by having a privacy security engineer on staff. We need somebody who can help with product enablement. All of these are reasons why we see people use contractors for product engineering. Strategic, and this is the final one. A lot of high-level people in privacy are doing things like helping an organization that may not have a CPO report to a board about their risk, about their business opportunity, or perhaps data monetization. We're about to acquire a business, or we've now conglomerated a lot of data and we're wondering how we can monetize it. What should we do? What could we do? What will we do? And bringing in somebody who's an expert and has done this particularly at a very cachet firm or a cachet logo in a Fortune 500 company, they are available. And we do get a lot of requests, particularly from private equity or venture capital-backed companies whose director of IT or CIO is responsible for everything from security, privacy, or their general counsel is responsible for all of privacy, legal, and operational. So this is something that we're seeing a lot more of, particularly in this downturn in a macroeconomic environment. So if we look at the trends over the last 13 years for privacy contracting, you'll see here, it's just has not been the main modality in which people are attracting and retaining talent. But you'll see in 2020, that all changed, right? 56% of placements of people who actually took jobs that we've been tracking were contract positions. This makes a lot of sense. COVID hits, massive business uncertainty, 14% unemployment, contract utilization skyrockets. But look how quickly it declines again in 21 and 22. And really, if I take out Q4 of 2022, this probably looks like more high 20s, low 30s, right? Because there was so little contracting going on because there was so much full-time hiring going on. Then October of 2022 happens, and you see what's happened in 2023 is we're at 52% of jobs actually taken have been contract. Now, here's what we're predicting for 2024. We think that's going to skyrocket to 65%. Mainly because there's not going to be the amount of full-time jobs available, but the demand for privacy impact is extremely high and people are very understaffed. Watch what happens in 2025. We think that goes back down to nearly 35% as full-time hiring comes back on. Talent inflates in terms of base compensation again. Competition increases exponentially for full-time hires. And if we do a little squiggly line across this, you'll see this is about a 2-year trend. Just like we talked about at the beginning of this session, hot job market versus slow job market. The only difference now is the shifts in the peak and the valley are much more extreme. And this is a result of the pandemic, and this won't change. Our economy now swings from high to low every 24 months, and the privacy industry is absolutely indicative of that. Back to what we said before in terms of predictions, 50% of people thought maybe they could use a contractor. 18% already had approval. That's a lot of people. That's another reason why we think in 2024, we're going to see such a massive shift to contract hiring and data privacy.
Jared, what if I can't get additional budget for a contractor, but my business will let me use one if I can reallocate funds? Where do I get that money from?
So you got approval, but you didn't get more money. And the way that we would recommend is look within. So here we've listed our true all-inclusive bill rates based on job responsibility that matches the previous FTE chart that we showed you before and the average consulting firm or outside counsel rate. If you're sending this work outside, you're probably paying 2 to 5 times as much per hour for a very similar, same caliber of talent as you may get through true staffing partners. Here's our rates. Here are those outsourced rates. You can save money in your budget by pulling from the outside sourcing and bringing it in with a true contractor.
So Jared, what is True's guidance for contract resources?
So first, you've got to make contract augmentation an ongoing part of your business and of your program. This is no longer just a reactionary function of a down economy. This is how programs are maturing at scale without always hiring full-time resources. Second, leverage high caliber privacy pros this year in 2022 to impact your program and then phase them out. There's going to be a lot of really talented people available for the next 12 months before the market gets hot again. Privacy contractor supply will match or exceed demand until late 2024. So the timing is now. And finally, contracting talent directly through True will significantly decrease outsourced spend while maintaining quality and caliber.
Jared, let's talk about how to get budget and buy-in for remote flexibility.
And the impact on work from home is indelible and has completely changed the workforce. So these statistics are brought to us from the IAPP salary survey. And what the IAPP found, and they interviewed thousands of people, was that 70% of people, about 69%, are working more from home than they are in office. 40% of those are fully remote. all 5 days, fully remote. Only 5% of people are in an office 5 days a week. So what does that tell us if we simplify it? It essentially said that 70% of people are working 3 days or less in an office, and 30% of people are working in an office 4 days or more. And what we found that we think is really compelling is if you shift your in-office policy from 3 days to 2 days, the amount of candidate interest increases by 50%. So if you've got 5 candidates that are interested in your 3-day-a-week in-office position, and you drop that down to 2 days a week, you're going to now have about 8 candidates that are interested. And this is really important because that minor shift from 3 to 2 days can completely change the volume of candidates. Now, conversely, if you go from 5 days to 0 days or 0 days to 2 days, this will also affect both attrition and talent attraction. So integrating a work from home flexibility into your strategy for hiring is now essential for all hiring managers in data privacy. Here we have, and this to me is the most incredible bit of data. The dark blue line is in-office jobs that were 4 days or more in an office. The light blue line are hybrid jobs that are 3 days or less. And as you can see in 2023, 92% of positions that have actually been accepted and filled with a person are 3 days or less in an office. Now, this isn't just because there are significantly more 3 days a week in an office or less jobs available, although that is part of it. The other part of this is that if you're 4 or 5 days in an office, it is going to take you a lot longer to fill your job. 70% of people are working remotely from home 3 days or more. And as a result, they're not willing to come back into an office for 4 to 5 days a week, even when they're unemployed. They'd rather become a contractor, stay remote, and wait for the market to rebound before they accept a full-time position where they might have to go into an office. 7% are 4 to 5 days a week in an office that have been filled this year. And part of that is because a lot of these jobs that require 4 to 5 days a week that were open in February, March, April, guess what? They're still open. They can't get them filled because they're 4 to 5 days a week in an office, and they won't use an agency, and they won't use a contractor, and it's got to be in a major metropolitan city like New York or San Francisco or Chicago, where people in 2020, 2021, and 2 moved away from the epicenter of the pandemic. And so what we're seeing is 3 or less days in an office is the new normal. If you're looking for 4 to 5 days, expect 90 to 120 days longer to fill your position. Motivations for privacy job seekers. It hasn't changed. Despite everything else changing pretty dramatically in 2023, the number one motivator. So when people come to us looking for work, we always ask them, it's the first thing we ask is, what's driving you? What's your motivation? Why are you looking for a job? The number one reason, working remotely from home. Either a policy change, and that policy could be from 0 to 2 days a week or 2 days to 3 days. Any shift in policy will motivate people to look for work opportunities, so prepare accordingly. As you can see, money is the number 3 motivator, challenge and more opportunity now number 2, whereas people were sick of their bosses back in 21 and 22, but working remotely from home is a clear standalone in terms of the number 1 motivator.
Jared, what is True's guidance in remote versus in office?
So any increases in return to office policy are going to lead to employee attrition. And I was surprised that article in the Wall Street Journal didn't go into this quite specifically, but it's true that a lot of people are creating return to office policies because they want people to quit. And that's a good way to do it. 3 days in an office a week or less is the new normal. We are not going back to a world where we're all in an office 5 days a week. The candidate marketplace will not allow for it, even in a down economy. 3, give greater work from home flexibility, increases the volume of available job seekers. If you're looking for someone in an office in New York City versus remote anywhere in the country, you're going to have significantly more hiring options on the latter than you will the former. And I think that's it. Is that our guidance? That's it.
Yep. Now let's talk about how to get budget and buy-in to use True or an agency.
All right. Well, this is my favorite part of the conversation. So I mentioned earlier in this call, we were allowed to ask 3 pre-qualifying questions to all the CPOs who were attending the forum at Consero. Here are the first 2, again, as you can see. But the third question we were allowed to ask is, are you approved to use a third-party agency? And as you can see, 25% were. 1 in 4 is not bad. 43% were not. and 32% said maybe. So what the next 10, 15 minutes of this presentation are going to do is help all of you that are looking for reasons to advocate to get the budget or buy-in to use our organization or an organization like ours. And if you can't, we're going to educate you on what are the pitfalls to look out for, what are the obstacles that you're going to face doing what we call DIY staffing, do-it-yourself staffing. So we took a look at all these job descriptions. We looked at 2,300 job descriptions that we've conglomerated over the last 13 years. These are either for program directors and managers, CPOs, CISOs, GCs, anybody that's in a hiring authority. What did their job description say in terms of you have to go hire your own people? You're not going to get help. You got to find your own staff. Either recruit your own staff, source and parse resumes, use your network, train an AI model for hiring efficiency. Less than 4% of those 2,300 job descriptions said anything about that, which means 96% of your job responsibility as a leader is not staffing. So how many of you that are in a DIY staffing capacity are spending more than 4%, right? That's less than an hour a week doing staffing. And I know because my customers have told me they're spending a lot more time than that. The average is around like 20% of their time on a weekly basis trying to fill their own jobs or collaborating with people internally to try to fill their own jobs. So you have to ask yourself, what are you not doing that you were asked to do on your job description when you were hired if you're now spending all this time having to staff and recruit for yourself? So what does it mean to DIY staff? How do you go about it? Well, the first way is you leverage your personal network. We all know that those networks are relatively finite. The second is you go to conferences. You use a conference as a job fair. Okay, that makes sense. But then let's look at the rest of these. You post a job on LinkedIn. That's how most people go about doing it. You post a job on your company website. You post a job on a third-party website like IAPP job boards or dataprivacyjobs.com, or you lean into your human resource team or talent acquisition team, who in turn post a job on a website, right? So with so much posting going on as the primary means with which people are doing DIY staffing, how effective is posting a job online? Well, we went and actually looked at how many candidates we successfully place who apply to a job, and we post 100 plus jobs that are in rotation every week. How many people that applied to a job posted actually got a job through us? And what we found is 17% got a job eventually, right? They may not have gotten a job that they applied for. We might have redirected them to another job, but 17%. But when you actually look at people who applied for that job, did they get that job that they applied for? It drops to 8%. That means 92% of the time, we're filling jobs with people that are not from applicants that are applying directly online. What does that say? That says two things. One, are you getting the best possible talent from inbound job applicants when 92% of the time when you're working with True, they're not coming from that source? And what's getting missed if those jobs are not getting filled effectively from an inbound resume submission? So we extrapolate that out a little bit further. What are the limitations and talent challenges of DIY staffing? Well, the first is posting job limits you only to potentially that 8% of truly qualified people for those jobs. In addition to that, posting a job also creates an enormous amount of volume. We get thousands of resumes a week, most of which are not qualified for the jobs that they've applied for, not even remotely qualified, and parsing through those can be very time consuming. So how do we parse through all those resumes? Well, one of the ways we parse through all those resumes is we use AI. And now I'm going to tell everybody a quick horror story. So I had a customer that was looking to hire a privacy counsel, and they've been looking to hire a privacy counsel. They went through their network. It didn't work. They used HR, and HR was getting hundreds and hundreds of resumes a week. HR was frustrated with the volume of resumes they were getting a week. So they used ChatGPT to cull resumes and started bucketing people out. The biggest amount of resumes they were getting that were unqualified were from law clerks who wanted this privacy counsel position but were not qualified. So this HR individual used an AI model to essentially not only disqualify people from the job, but then send them an automated disposition email saying, we've received your resume and we're not sure you're qualified for this position, we'll keep you on file. Now, this same individual that's the hiring manager in the general counsel's office goes to a conference to use that conference as a job fair, sees some of their ex-employees that they worked with at their former employer and says, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I ran into you. I have a job at my organization. I really want you to apply for it. And Rachel, what do you think those two people said?
I did apply and I was dispositioned.
They did apply and they got dispositioned. Why did they get dispositioned? Because they had law clerk on their resume. 20 years ago, they had law clerk for a federal judge, which is a real, actually impressive accolade. But because that was what was on their resume, because that was what was built into the AI module, they got dispositioned. So there's tons of babies getting thrown out with the bathwater, which is also why only 8% of inbound people are actually getting those jobs. So who is training your AI modules for resume parsing? Is it you? Is it HR? And is it an HR person that knows your business and knows your industry vertical? Because remember, most people who got fired when everybody got fired were internal recruiters in corporations. Because if you're not looking to hire for the next 12 months, then why are you going to keep a bunch of recruiters on staff in-house? The problem with that is you lose all that institutional knowledge and you lose all the subject matter expertise that they've built staffing for a specific program like privacy. So how much time are you going to spend as a privacy hiring manager training those modules in order for you to do your own staffing? Applicant tracking systems are often non-existent in a lot of these organizations, much less well-governed so that they are searchable and recall candidates who may not be right for the job they applied for, but could be right for a job later, right? We're seeing that about another 9% of people, in addition to that 8%, are getting jobs later that aren't the jobs they applied for, at least through True. And a lot of you don't have access as hiring managers to these applicant tracking systems. Hiring managers' personal networks often have more peers than subordinates. If all of you are looking to hire between 3 and 8 years of experience, how many of you are going to conferences where you're spending a lot of time with people with 3 to 8 years experience? A lot of chief privacy officers are going to things like Consera CPO Forum and winding up socializing with a lot of people that they're not going to hire. Privacy pros with 3 to 6 years of experience, which are the highest demand, guess what? They're not getting the budget to go to conferences anymore. And sometimes when they do get permission, much less budget to go to conferences, those conferences are moved to virtual conferences post-pandemic. And one thing that's not the same about a virtual conference versus an in-person one is the ability to source and recruit on premise, meaning it's a lot harder when you got everybody on a webinar to try to recruit that one individual that might be right for your job, but it might not be as hard at that cocktail hour after a panel or sharing an educational panel with somebody and sitting next to them and talking with them while you're there allows you to recruit. You don't get that. You can transfer knowledge, maybe the same in a virtual webinar, but recruiting, not so much. So here are all the challenges and limitations to doing it yourself. And one of the reasons why using an agency is much more effective, both from a time, cost, effort, energy perspective. But listen, don't just take my anecdotes for it. Let's get to the data. Over the last 90 days, there's a 75% likelihood, and we talked about this at the top, that the candidate, when you make an offer and you're the first one to make an offer, is going to accept, right? Only 20% are accepting a second offer, and less than 5% are even getting or accepting a third. Now go back to what it looked like in 2022, please. That drops to 45%. That means you had less than a 50% chance of ensuring that if you're the first person to make them an offer, that they're going to say yes, because candidates were getting multiple offers, there were more jobs available. So being first right now has tremendous value in terms of ensuring an acceptance and not having to go back to the well and start your process over, or increase your comp in order to get that candidate to take your offer instead of someone else's. So let's take a look at how fast it takes True to fill jobs. The top blue line here is executive search. As you can see, at the peak of the pandemic, we were filling CPO jobs in less than a month, about a month and a few days. That is now extended to about 90 to 105 days. But as you can see in the middle of the market, we've stayed pretty consistent between 35 and 45 days, despite all the economic changes. So it takes us about 35, 45 days to fill a job. A temp job, however, which is the bottom blue line, sometimes less than a week in the peak of the pandemic. Now it's about 2 weeks, sometimes a little bit more, but that is the fastest way to get talent working for your program. Now, we've been tracking how long it takes some of our customers to try to do it on their own, and the differences are staggering. At the executive level, it's nearly 2 times X. So we're seeing jobs stay open for nearly 100 to 120 days longer to fill on their own than it would through true staffing partners. And if we go to the mid-market and look at true versus DIY, it's even more dramatic and has been increasingly more dramatic as less people are willing to leave their jobs. We're filling jobs in about 35 to 45 days. When you do it yourself, it's taking an average of 90 to 120 days, which means by the time you fell in love with a candidate, you might have lost 2 or 3 along the way who've taken other offers, because our timeline is 45 and we're getting acceptances on the first offer extended, which is why speed is so important, versus 90 to 120 days, which is nearly 3 to 4 times the length of a job search process for a mid-market candidate at 3 to 8 years of experience. The fastest way, do it on contract. We don't have a comparative analysis here, but we can tell you that it gets done in less than 2 weeks when you're onboarding a contractor. It also takes a lot less interviews to bring on a contractor, generally speaking, than a full-time employee. So let's look at the cost of agency staffing, because the thing we hear all the time is, it's too expensive to use an agency. But is it? Is it really? If the average base salary for a mid-market pro in privacy, which is what most of you are looking to hire, is 125 to 175 across any role responsibility, and the IAPP validates this, saying that their mean is about 147. So let's call it 150,000 in salary. The average fee for a recruiter is 20 to 25%. Let's call it 22.5. That means the average fee for most privacy professionals is going to be around $33,000 for an agency fee. So if you extrapolate that out against other expenditures in your budget, $33,000 for an agency fee to acquire a privacy professional. When you look at outsourced bill rates at $250 to $300, and that's us being generous on what people are billing for outside counsel or third-party consulting fees, that's about 95 to 105 hours to reach the same equivalent of $33,000, which is 4 weeks, which also, ironically enough, is about a month of outsourced billables and is also the exact timeline it takes for true staffing partners to fill a job, 35 to 45 days, which is about $6,000 to $6,500 a week, which on a monthly basis is about $33,000 a month of DIY. So every month that you're doing it yourself, it's costing you another $33,000 in other spend. And if you extrapolate that out into a quarter, it's around $100,000 a quarter. So you could be spending $400,000 a year trying to fill a job on your own when it would only cost you $33,000 to fill it in a month.
Jared, what is True's guidance for cost and risks of DIY staffing?
Present strong statistical, which is what this presentation was all about, and anecdotal data regarding the risks and disadvantages associated with DIY staffing to your budgetary stakeholders. Second, calculate the time, effort, and energy spent doing your own self-sourcing versus focusing on your primary job responsibilities. That's the 96% of your job description. Third, use speed of hire metrics to calibrate how long you have until a job seeker receives another offer. If we're filling it in 35 to 45 days for mid-market and your search is taking 90 to 120, you know you're going to start losing people along the way. You need to accelerate your process. And finally, be first, be fast, and you will get an acceptance. Thank you for joining us. We're going to stay a little bit past the hour to answer some questions for those of you that have them. I know Rachel's been curating them as we've been going through, but please take advantage of some of the additional resources that we have. We've got a chief privacy interview playbook, a CISO interview playbook, how to use contractors to expand your business, a lot of which we've covered in today's presentation, and a privacy hiring manager frequently asked questions to help both the interviewer and interviewee prepare for a privacy interview. Here's all of Rachel's contact info. If you need any of this recapped or you want to have an individualized conversation with us about your program or your needs or your career, please get in touch with Rachel. She will get you in touch with the right person here at our organization, which is probably her, to talk about your needs. Now, Rachel, do we have any questions?
We do. What is the proportion of contractors hired by True who work outside of the US?
Sure. So it's about 15%. And that's for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is just the demand in the US far exceeds the demand in Europe, APAC, and in Latin America. Although we do have a number of contractors that work, I mean, we staff in 88 countries. And so we do have a lot of contractors that work in different places, particularly the UK, sometimes in Germany, France, We even have a few in Israel, Dubai. It is very difficult to get a contractor in mainland China. So if you're looking to hire in mainland China, not Hong Kong, you're probably going to need FTE approval. It is very difficult to get contractors in China. Australia, we have some contractors. So it really depends, but just the volume in the US, both in terms of generalized hiring, but certainly contract hiring, just completely outweighs the rest of the world.
Jared, what's the average time to hire a privacy engineer today?
Yeah, so most privacy engineers we would consider mid-market, so somewhere in that 35 to 45 day range, assuming that our customer or client can move through their process with a decent amount of speed and regularity. Sometimes that can extend a little bit further. But again, if you're looking for somebody to be in an office as a privacy engineer 4 or 5 days a week, that may accelerate that individual search up to 90 days.
All right, I think all the others got answered throughout the presentation as we went along. So
we are literally right on the money at 3 o'clock. I know that was a lot of information for everybody. I hope this gives you the confidence and the resources to go to your financial stakeholders, advocate for your program, advocate for additional headcount, advocate for creative ways to staff, and advocate for true staffing partners to be in your corner. Thank you for joining
Jared,
us.
we have one more question. Can we sneak it in at the end here?
Yeah, bring it, bring it.
What are the roles expected from privacy professionals nowadays? Generative AI has been added to the mix. Anything else?
So one of the things we're starting to see pop up is what we are what I see being called AIA, which I assume means artificial intelligence assessments, which I think will align themselves with the PIA or DPIA. But I think the real first role for AI is going to be policy, right? Last week was a landmark week for policy. We saw Biden's come out. We saw the UN had a ruling. Europe looks like it's going to pass its legislation. And so I think the policy will be the first thing, which will lean towards the legal side of privacy that will have to then communicate and collaborate with the operational and technical. But I don't think yet we've seen enough trending to say how AI is really going to impact each individual job along the privacy spectrum. Our best guess is it's going to start with policy and expand out from there.
All right, that's it.
Great question. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here. And for those of you watching the replay, thank you for taking the time to tune in. Hope to hear from all of you soon.
Thank you.